Hi. Okay, I'm getting comfortable because this is not going to be a fun video. Mentally preparing myself. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to start this. Honestly, don't even know. And I'm definitely very anxious to film this, so sorry if my voice is kind of shaky or if you can sense that I'm uncomfortable, because I am. But it is OCD Awareness Week, and I have been meaning to tell my story for a very long time now, just because I really wanted to share my story this week out of all weeks, because I talk so much about mental health and especially ROCD and stuff like that on my Instagram, which if you don't follow me, it's at Jasmine Lauren. It just felt wrong to not be upfront about what actually happened, because I feel like that's a huge part of my story and I know it will help a lot of people. So that is why I'm sharing this video today. It is to help anybody out there that struggling with similar things that I was struggling with. Also, anybody that is just curious, which I don't blame you because it's a really strange topic. But yeah, so let me start out by saying that I am in no way a doctor. I am not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't have any licenses or anything. I just know what I know from experience and a lot of Googling, which you'll hear more about later. But this is my ROCD story. So about, I want to say a year and a half ago, almost 2 years, all of this kind of started for me. I was never really an anxious person. At least that's what I thought. I thought some of the things that I was feeling was simply just everyday stress, not a big deal. Anxiety and a lot of mental health runs in my family, so it was kind of naive of me to think that I was gonna get the lucky draw and make it out without anything wrong. So I basically had, I want to say, one night, I don't know what happened, it just hit me all at once. I was in the process of moving jobs in addition to adding a second job. So it was just, there was a lot going on in my life, and subconsciously I wasn't ready for all of that, but on the top of everything I was like, I'm fine, I feel fine, I can handle this. But that kind of ended up just putting me over the edge, and I started having a lot of anxiety, and I was like, what's wrong with me? I can't breathe, my heart's pounding. Slowly but surely I started to realize that I just had really bad anxiety, and so I kind of dealt with that in every way that I knew possible, which was get rid of everything in my life that makes me anxious. And that was what I had lived by my entire life, because I didn't know it was anxiety. I always thought it was my gut. You know, I do something new or something happens, I meet someone and I feel this weird feeling in my stomach, something's wrong, I need to stop doing this. That was kind of my connection. And so I quit my job, I worked solely at this other job, and I was gonna say it was fine and dandy, but it was quite the opposite. And it got to a point where I wasn't sleeping, I don't even know how to explain it. I was a mess. I was crying every day when I got home from work. I was crying in the bathroom at work. It was just a disaster. And so I ended up seeking a therapist. I wasn't too nervous about finding a therapist, simply because I have been in therapy before and it wasn't a great experience, but I wasn't afraid to talk about how I was feeling. That's something that I learned throughout this whole process, is I love to talk about my feelings. It is really obnoxious. I'm sorry. But it's just something that I am very open about, and I always have been. I wasn't really that nervous, so I went to therapy, and I was explaining to my therapist that I was having a really hard time identifying with who I am with anxiety, because I was having, a lot of those, I've always been this super strong, not a care in the world person, and now all of a sudden I'm not. Yeah, so I was telling her that, and she basically was like, well, it sounds to me like you just need to find yourself. And in the moment, I was like, yeah, you're right. I do need to find myself. Because, what else are you supposed to say? No, you're wrong, or I don't know. I was shy. So I went home, and I was like, I had a good therapy session. Everything's good. And then I remember I was doing laundry. This is, the very vivid memory, because this is when my first intrusive thought happened. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, what if I have to leave Arthur, my boyfriend, in order to find myself? I don't know. It was just, if you don't know me, and I'm sorry if you don't, but I've been with my boyfriend since my senior year of high school. Actually, 2 weeks before I graduated high school. So essentially like freshman college. Very young. We're still together. It's been almost 7 years now. So we've been together for a long time. And if I could say one thing about our relationship over the past 5 years at this point, there was not a doubt in my mind that I was going to marry this man. I was going to have his babies. I was going to settle down with him. Like, he was my person. Everything about him just, we clicked. Never had a second guess. Like, I never worried about our relationship. Even when we were in the midst of some of the biggest fights we'd had, I never questioned whether I wanted to be with him or not. So it's like, it's always just been a constant in my life, and I'm so grateful for that. So I had this thought, like, what if I have to leave Arthur? And I was literally petrified because, one, I don't want to leave my boyfriend because I love him. That's why I'm with him. And two, I don't want to leave my boyfriend. I just spit everywhere. It was terrifying because I was thinking no matter what I do and what I want, I was going to have to leave him. And that is where my obsessive thoughts started. So I sat there and I cried, called my mom, asked for her advice, called my dad and my stepmom, asked for their advice, called my therapist even, and I was like, you said something that freaked me out. Now I have to break up with my boyfriend. And she was just like, what are you talking about? No, you don't. For about like a good 48 hours, I was obsessively thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna have to leave him, I'm gonna have to leave him, I'm gonna have to leave him. It was literally like repetitive like that. Like, I have to leave him, I have to leave him, I can't be with him. It's gonna end anyways, like, I need to go and find myself or else I'll be anxious forever. That was kind of like what I was thinking. We actually were going to a wedding that weekend. We were going to see Arthur's best friend Adam and his wife, or fiance at the time, Emily. They were getting married, and it was something we were so excited for, and we were just like, I don't know, we were just really happy for them, and it just came at the worst time because it was at a point where I was watching, you know, two young people in love getting married, while in my head I'm thinking, I have to leave my boyfriend, I have to leave my boyfriend, I have to leave him, I have to leave him. It was like literally as repetitive as that, and no matter what, I was like, I don't want to. My brain was just like, you have to, you have to. And it got to the point where Sunday, that morning after the wedding, I woke up Arthur at like 6 a.m, and I was like, I'm so sorry, but I have to figure out what this means. I was like, I feel terrible. I can't sleep. I'm crying all the time. I'm having panic attacks. I was just honestly like, I can't do this. And I told him, I was like, I think we should try taking a break. I'm going to go stay with my mom for a couple of days, and I'll see if the thoughts lessen, or like if this gut feeling in my stomach goes away. The feeling, it was just like, it was pure emptiness. And when he told me, like, okay, that's fine, you know, call me later, he was so understanding, because he knew, he believed in me for a lot longer than I did. So I went to my mom's house, and I'm not gonna lie, I felt this sense of relief. It was like instant gratification, no more of those questions in my head. I was just like, cool, the thoughts are gone, like, I feel good. And then I felt a different wave of emotions, and it was pure sadness. I have never felt as upset as I did when I did that. And I'm gonna start crying now, but I can't describe it. It was like absolutely pure emptiness, and everything around me didn't matter anymore. I felt lost, and I remember going out to lunch with my mom, and driving with my best friend Danielle, who took me out to lunch, and you know, she tried to understand what I was talking about. I don't know if she did or not, but she was a really good friend. But it was just terrible. I remember just sitting, and I there's no other word to describe it, but like, I felt like nothing. It was the strangest thing. I couldn't have a single thought. It was just, everything in my mind was blank. I felt numb. I the moment I thought about what I had done, I would just start hysterically crying. In my head, I would just kept thinking to myself, like, what have I done? Because I love this man. I don't want to leave him. And so I had an emergency therapy session with my therapist, and I was like, we need to talk right now. And so she like booked me a couple days early, and I told her everything that happened, and she was just like, you know, I think this is a perfect example of you kind of being lost, and you take what other people say about you and what they think about you as facts, and you run with it, and you don't kind of hold your ground on what you think. And she's like, that's what I meant by finding yourself, was not so much, you know, going eat, pray, love and going to Paris and whatever, but just kind of standing by what you believe in. I kind of realized that, you know, the reason I had that thought was that she kind of put it in my head. She, you know, she didn't put it in my head. She's honestly a really great therapist, but she had said something that triggered me, and so I somehow was like, it's her fault that made me think that, so it must not be true. Then I felt sudden relief, and I was like, I need to get back with Arthur. So of course, I went to the mall and I bought him like a cookie cake that said like, sorry for being an idiot, or like, thanks for putting up with my shit, or like some kind of funny like Pinterest worthy photo. I brought it to him. He came home from work and he saw that I was home, and we just hugged, and I cried, and you know, it was just like a very warm feeling. Like, I'm gonna try and explain these emotions because I don't really know, and I'm talking with my hands on. I'm really sorry. So the next few months were the hardest months of my life, because I thought that now that I had figured it all out, the thoughts would go away. And that was the furthest from the truth, because that's not how this illness works, unfortunately. So I spent months and months with these terrible thoughts about Arthur popping up. They would be anywhere from, you know, you need to find yourself was a big one for me. I would think like, well, I have this gut feeling that I am not supposed to be with him, so I must leave him. I would think, you know, well, I would hug him and I'd be like, I'm gonna see how I feel when I hug him. If I feel happy and if I feel warm and fuzzy, then I know he's the one for me. And so I would like go and hug him, and in my head be constantly checking, like, how do I feel? How do I feel right now? Do I feel love? Do I feel infatuation? Do I want to kiss him? And all the time, that was no, because I was an anxious mess. You know, when you're anxious, you don't feel anything but anxiety, and anxiety will always try and make you think that something's wrong. And so I had taken these cues like, oh my gosh, when I hug him, I don't feel love. That must mean I don't love him. And so I was just constantly Googling, like, what's the difference between being in love and loving someone? When should I break up with someone? When do you know you've met the one? Like, what's it like dating other people? Like, I can't be with him. We're so young. Like, I need to date around before I find other people. It's terrible. And I ended up going through what I now know was a really intense depression. I spent, again, every single day coming home from work on my lunch and just crying, coming back to work, wiping my makeup and going back to work. Tired all the time because I was crying all the time. It's like, that's very emotionally draining and physically draining. I don't know, other than like every thought in the world came through my head. I would look at Arthur and think, you know, oh, he's gained weight. I can't be with someone who's gained weight. Or like, oh, he's got bigger love handles than I remember, like, and I don't like that, so I should just leave him, because like I'm not supposed to be with someone if I don't like something about them, right? And like, you know, oh, he's got pimples on his, you know, chin sometimes, and I think they're gross, so like, you're not supposed to be grossed out by your partner, so I need to leave. It's like almost as if my brain, as if it was like a separate entity from my own, was constantly trying to convince me to leave Arthur. It threw every single thing it could at me to try and get me to leave. And many times it was very convincing. And it was really hard because I knew in my heart that I didn't want to leave him, or I didn't want to leave him, but I knew that something was wrong. And I was just like, there's something that's not right here. And because the thoughts were centered around Arthur, I was like, it must be Arthur. So I pretty much went into my therapy sessions every week talking about this Arthur thing and like new thoughts that I had had and new obsessions that I was thinking, like what ifs, like what if I need to leave him? What if I need to date some guy, another guy before I know I want to marry him? What if I need to have like a quick hookup in a club bathroom before I like can settle down? Because like I've never done that. Like, am I supposed to do that before? I don't know. I could sit here all day and tell you like all the stupid thoughts that I had, but they were there and they were very hard to ignore because those thoughts terrified me. When I had them, you know, when I thought to myself like, oh, I'm gonna have to leave, it literally felt like something like dropped from my chest into my stomach, and it was really hot. It's like my whole body just felt like it dipped into like hot wax, and that's like the best way I can describe it. But that is that feeling that I got every single time one of those thoughts came in my head, and it made me feel physically ill. And so I remember my therapist saying, you are talking an awful lot about this Arthur thing. And I was like, well, yeah, like I'm freaking out about it. Like, what do I do? I'm not happy. Like, you know, all this stuff is happening. And she was very insistent on basically saying, I don't think it has anything to do with Arthur. You know, I think you just didn't have something to pinpoint this anxiety on, and your brain kind of just chose something. And I was like, what does that mean? And so she mentioned something about obsessive compulsive disorder, and I was like, I don't have that. I don't clean. I'm not organized. Like, I'm not that person. And then she told me that it's more so like the obsessive thoughts that I was having. The thing to clear up is when it comes to obsessive thoughts, they are literally constantly in your head. They're not like something you think about and then you go and do dishes and you have a good day, and then when you go to bed, you think about it again. I mean, it's literally 24/7. The moment I would open my eyes in the morning, the first thought in my head was, you're gonna have to leave Arthur today. And that was when I kind of realized, like, okay, this isn't normal. And so my therapist recommended taking antidepressants, which was honestly the most terrifying thing that I had to like come up against, I guess, because I have never thought that I would ever be like bad enough to where I needed medication, or that I would be bad enough where I couldn't do it on my own. Like, I wasn't strong enough to get through it on my own. But, you know, I talked with Arthur about it. I talked with, you know, my family, my dad, my mom, and it was just like, you know, right now I need some help because I'm having trouble literally functioning as a human being because of these stupid thoughts in my head. So I went to like 5 different sessions with psychiatrists and therapists, doctors' offices, and like consultations. They were literally like interviews where people were interviewing me, being like, tell me how upset you are, and if I feel like you're upset enough, then I'll prescribe you these. It was honestly terrible. Every day I was basically having to convince someone how terrible I felt in order for them to help me, and that was really hard for me. I got prescribed Zoloft, and it took about, I want to say like 4 or 5 months for it to actually start working. And I've been on it for about a year now, but at about 6 months, I noticed a significant reduction in my thoughts. And that's not to say they weren't there, because they were definitely still there, unfortunately. But I just had more strength, I guess, to talk back to them, to kind of argue with them. And when those thoughts pop up in my head, I would be like, that's not true. Like, okay, you know. And you kind of like, I did a lot of research at this time because I was kind of feeling like strong enough to do things again, I guess, so to speak. And I found Sheryl Paul. She is a therapist. I think she lives in like Oregon or something, or somewhere where there's lots of trees. I don't know. But she was the first site I found, and she talks a lot about relationship anxiety, and basically how being in a relationship is honestly like one of the most terrifying things you can do in your life, because you're vulnerable. There's a lot of uncertainty. And that was where I realized was an issue that I had, was dealing with uncertainty. So I don't know if one day I'm going to wake up and I'm not going to love Arthur anymore. And when I think about that, it absolutely terrifies me, shakes me to my core, because that sounds like the worst thing I could possibly do, because I love him right now. And, you know, I can't know for certain if in a year or two from now we'll still be together. And my brain, I kind of noticed that it had that pattern of, if something makes me anxious, to kind of get rid of it. And this relationship was something that made me anxious because I had a lot to lose. We'd been together for a long time. We're talking about moving away, which we ended up doing, like, hi, welcome to my house. And I didn't realize how scared I was, because I was like, I don't have commitment issues. I can't wait to get married. But then all this popped up, and I was like, you know, maybe I do. Maybe I do subtly have commitment issues. Like, great, now I'm going to have to leave my boyfriend. And then it starts again. I read a lot of Sheryl Paul. Her blog posts were great. They talked a lot about being young and in love and, you know, settling, which is another, you know, intrusive thought, like, oh my God, I'm settling. And just, she had a lot of blog posts that were really helpful about, like, what you can do to, like, counteract the thoughts. Like, she basically would make the blog post the title of, like, an intrusive thought that I was having, and I would read it, and it would give me enough relief to where, like, I wouldn't obsess about that thing for a while. And by a while, I mean, like, a week. Eventually, it would come back around. And so what I had to do is I had to screenshot all of these blog posts that, you know, were of intrusive thoughts that I was having. Like, are you falling out of love? Are you settling? Are you too young to be married? You know, what happens if you're not attracted to your partner? All of these things that, like, I was petrified of thinking. And whenever the thoughts would pop up, I would go back into my phone and I would read them and then feel relief. It was like, I'm like, cool, I figured this out, like, I can handle this. And eventually I got so exhausted of feeling so terrible to where I had to, like, read something or do something. And that's when I started reading the comments of Sheryl Paul's blog posts. And I found that someone had wrote, this is not relationship anxiety, this is relationship OCD. And it's actually, like, part of an OCD disorder. And I was like, that sounds familiar. So I Googled it, and I found out that relationship OCD, if you don't know what it is, it's like any other obsessive compulsive disorder. It literally is obsessive compulsive disorder, but when you have OCD, you obsess about something. It could be literally anything. Some people obsess about thinking they're allergic to everything. Some people obsess about whether or not they're going to harm the person next to them. Some people obsess about whether or not they're pedophiles, even if they know they're not. It takes on any form, and it attaches to things that you really care about, because it's a very evil disorder. And I say that with a smile, but it's not nice. So I did some research, and I found Stuart Ralph of the OCD Stories. And if I had to, like, give credit to the person that helped me the most, it would be him. He provides, I'll include all these links down below, but he provides so much information on, like, what ROCD is, and you hear so many things about other people, like, talking about it and doing this and all these things, and you realize that it's a pattern. My trigger, my thing that I get stuck on is my relationships. I have ROCD, and I will obsess about something, about Arthur, about how I feel. And there's actually two different parts of ROCD. You can have type A, which is you care about, or you're freaking out, obsessing about how you feel about your relationship. And then type B or something like that is, like, you obsessing about how the other person feels about the relationship. So it's essentially, you obsess about something. So in this case, for example, I would be like, am I falling out of love? Now that thought would scare the shit out of me, and so I would panic. I'd be like, what does that thought mean? Why is it there? What is it trying to tell me? Is there a secret? Am I supposed to leave my boyfriend? Like, why would this be happening if I wasn't supposed to leave my boyfriend? Blah, 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 blah. And I would literally ruminate on this one thought for so long. Wheels in my head just constantly being like, what if? I don't want to, but I have to. I don't want to, but I have to. And I would have to do something in order to make the anxiety go away, whether it's hugging Arthur and seeing, do I feel love? If I feel love, then I must not be falling out of love, because that means I'm still in love. Or I would Google, what does falling out of love feel like? Stupid. Or I would read these articles from Sheryl Paul, and I noticed that all of these are compulsions. And I didn't think they were because they're in my head. They're not compulsions that I do. I don't wash my hands. I don't, flip on a switch a couple times. They're all in my head. And this is a type of OCD that people are researching right now that's called pure O. Essentially, it stands for like purely obsessional, but it just also means that the compulsions that you're doing are all mental. So they're not visible to everybody else. So it's one of the hardest parts of OCD to have because no one sees it. It's like all in your head, and it's really hard to describe to anybody because there's no physical proof of it. So I ended up having a sit-down therapy session with Chrissie Hodges, who is a mental health advocate. She also has pure O. She has harm OCD, I believe. She wrote this book right here. But I had a sit-down conversation with her for about an hour over Skype, and I just kind of talked to her about what I was feeling. I swear by this. She said, if you find the pattern, you find the key. And I was like, okay, find the pattern, find the key. And so I basically made lists. What are the things that make me anxious? I made lists of the thoughts that I have. And essentially, I would keep an eye on myself. So if I had too much wine and didn't get enough sleep, if I didn't work out, or, something bad happened during the day that made me feel crummy, the thoughts about Arthur would pop up. They would be a little bit louder. They'd be a little more convincing. Normally when they pop up, I can just be like, yeah, there's that thought again. But when I'm anxious and the thought pops up, I'm like, tell me more. What do you mean? Like, let me hear more about it. And the reason why I was stuck for so long was because I was so anxious for so long that my wall was down. So these thoughts were getting thrown at me, and I was catching all of them. The only way I can describe it, I was just like, give me all the negative thoughts. Fuck me. And so I kind of learned my pattern. I learned why, thoughts popped up. And when I was able to see that I had more thoughts about Arthur when I was hungover and tired than when I was having a good day. And there were these moments too where I wasn't anxious, I wasn't upset. Okay, now I'm choking, sorry. There were moments where I wasn't anxious and I wasn't upset, and I would look at Arthur and I would feel love. And it was not what I thought love would feel like. It was literally like just nothing. If that makes sense. Like, I would look at him and I wouldn't feel like shit. And don't let that trigger you if you have RCD, because if you have ROCD, guarantee there are very small slivers of moments when you're with your partner where you don't feel that way. And that's what you have to hold on to. They're like these little moments of light in this darkness, and you have to hold on to those, because those are moments, those are you, that is your true self. I was starting to have these moments more often, and I was starting to have the lower moments less often. I can safely say now that I have had ROCD for like a year and a half now, since it kind of onset into my life or whatever. And I still have the thoughts every day, probably every day. But not that I don't listen to them, but I don't give them the time. I don't, if the thought pops up in my head, like, oh, you don't love Arthur, I'll be like, there's that thought again. And then I try and get on with what I'm doing. And I learned that the less that I ruminate about these thoughts, the less that I question where they came from, what they mean, what they're doing, the less they pop up. And a lot of people think that it's like you have to push the thoughts away, you have to argue with them, you have to, try and get them out of your head, you have to not think them. But that's the opposite of what you want to do. The point is if you truly 100% give yourself into the trust that what these thoughts are nothing, they go away. And it's so hard to describe, but it's essentially you just allow the thoughts to come. It's like anxiety. When you start to have anxiety, you can't freak out and go, oh my God, I'm starting to have anxiety. Like, I feel anxious. Like, bleh. You have to just be like, great, I'm anxious. Here we go. Just You coast it. Coast. And it's the same way with intrusive thoughts. If you have the thoughts, you feel it pop up, you just go, there it is. There it is. And then you sit with it and go, cool, I'm gonna think about something else now. And you have to do it. It's so fucking hard. And I am telling you this right now, it took me a year to be able to do. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not easy. It's the hardest thing you'll ever have to do in your life. But you just have to give in. And I don't mean give in as in do what the thoughts are telling you. You have to give in to living with the fact that these thoughts are going to be in your head and you can't do anything about them other than ignore them. Let them be there, but ignore them. Don't talk to them. Don't reason with them. Don't try to convince them why they're wrong and how you feel is right. Just don't. It's like a book being thrown at you. Don't open the book because you will never get out. That was my pattern. I saw it, I recognized it, and I figured it out. So yeah, I'm doing really well now. Arthur and I are the best we've ever been. Like I said, I still have the thoughts every day. Sometimes I'll look at Arthur and I'll be like, I don't feel like kissing you right now. Or I don't feel like, holding your hand and being with you. And I just want to be by myself. Instead of freaking out about that and thinking, oh my God, I don't want to be with him. I don't think he's attractive. I don't want to kiss him. That means I must not love him, which means I must leave him. I'll just be like, I'm going to go take a bath for a while and hang out with myself. And I learned that when I'm in those moments where my thoughts are really bad, what are you barking at? The best thing I can do is just give myself some self-love. And for me, that's a bottle of wine, not a glass, a bottle of wine, and a bubble bath. That's my thing. And online shopping, which is really dangerous. But also, roaming the halls of TJ Maxx or roaming the aisles of TJ Maxx are like some of my best self-love things that I do for myself. I go to the store, I look at clothes, I don't think about anything else in my life, and it is very relaxing. You're gonna find your thing, you're gonna find what makes, you calm down, but my only thing that I could tell you if you're struggling with ROCD is you are strong. You are stronger than you think. Don't give up, because you wouldn't be fighting as hard as you are right now if you didn't love your partner. You wouldn't be here watching this video if you didn't love your partner. It's such a hard thing to ask, whether it's there because it's an illness or it's there because you're actually supposed to leave your partner. It's a very thin line, they say, about which, and that's kind of the $1 million question. And essentially you have to put your trust in the relationship and know that you're going to work your hardest no matter what. And if it doesn't work out in the end, you have to learn to be okay with that. And it's very difficult. I used to tell myself, well, if one day I fall out of love with Arthur and I end up leaving him, then it will be easier than it is right now because I won't love him anymore. It won't be as hard to walk away if you don't love him. And right now, the idea of walking away makes me want to throw up literally every intestine in my body because I love him and I don't want to do that right now. Why would I? There isn't some external force trying to tell you something. I don't know if you're religious, but this isn't God trying to give you a warning sign. It's literally an illness. I can't say anything else other than please, if you're struggling with this, get help. Okay, sorry if the camera moved, my alarm went off. But what I was saying, I'm going to finish this video up because I'm sorry, it's literally 1,000,000 years long. If you're struggling with this illness, please get help, because it is not something that you can deal with just with your friends and family. And if you can, then, good luck. But please seek out a therapist. Most health insurances cover therapy. If you don't have a therapist, you can look into online counseling, such as like BetterHelp. There's a lot of online resources out there. I'll include all of the therapists and links to all my resources that I've used in the description. There's a few apps that I recommend if you're struggling with this as well. Just like go to town. With the way it works with OCD, the more information you have on what it is and what's going on, the less susceptible you are to get dragged into it. That makes sense. Because it's kind of like you know the wave's coming and you can prepare for it. That's my ROCD story. And that will be my ROCD story for the rest of my life, because I'm going to live with this for the rest of my life. Hope you enjoyed watching, and if this video helped you out in any way, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe. And also follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is @JasmineLauren. Feel free to DM me. Like I always say, my DMs are open to anybody who needs a little advice. Like I said, I'm not a therapist, and I do not like when people message me telling me that they're anxious and they don't know what to do, because there's only so much I can do. I can give you resources, I can't save you. And this is the part where you need to save yourself. And it's really scary, but I will gladly guide you and help you along the way. So please DM me if you're struggling. I can point you in the right direction. But yeah, so make sure to subscribe, give this video a thumbs up. I gotta go back to work because, yeah, and I think I'm gonna take a bubble bath and drink my ginger ale. It's too early for wine. Yeah, it's too early for wine. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Bye.